Did you know that kinky wellness is integral to your self-development? Hi, welcome to The Partition, home of kinky wellness, the ultimate destination to explore the integral connection between kinky wellness and your personal development. I'm your host and kinky wellness coach, Dana Shergill, and each Monday I bring on a special guest to dive into specific aspects of kinky wellness. From unconventional practices to thought-provoking conversations, I'm here to break down barriers and redefine the boundaries of wellness and pleasure. Don't forget to join me for my solo shows on Wednesdays, where I explore even further into the multifaceted layers of kinky wellness. So let's strip away the shame and taboo together and have an open conversation about it. Hey, and welcome back. Today we are joined by a fan favorite, Pro-Domme, professional human behavioral expert, and alternative lifestyles coach with over 15 years of experience, D20Domme. D20Domme was previously on the show in episode 91, How to Increase Self-Awareness and Live More Authentically, and again in episode 131, where we set the record straight on age and pet play. However, in this episode, D20Domme is back to tell us everything we need to know about the infamous play type, urophilia. Better categorized or known as water sports, which include play activities such as golden showers. Once again, D20Domme is here to remind us that pleasure comes in many forms and not to judge a book by its cover. So let's jump right into it and welcome back D20Domme. Welcome back to the show, D20Domme. How are you doing today?
As ever, I am very well and always happy to chat with you.
It's always such a good conversation when you're on the show today. So I'm excited because we're going into play types. And today we're going to be focusing a little bit on water play and what it is, what it isn't, misconceptions, and all the shebang that goes with it.
That's fun. I hope that we can trickle in some information for folks.
Well, let's start by defining what I guess encompasses water play and what kind of play types go into that.
hmm This kink has a lot of names: piss play, water sports, golden showers, erotic urination. But its name is linked to urolagnia, which is just the tendency to derive sexual pleasure from the sight or thought of urination. But it just really means what you think, that you enjoy or get sexual pleasure from anything pertaining to pee.
Yeah, initially it's a lot more common than I think people want to admit, but it's one of those play types that again, not a lot of people are the first to be like, "Oh, I'm into this play type." They're more like waiting for the other person to kind of mention it first before bringing it up.
Yeah, yeah. For some people, they're going to be a little more shy about this type of play, but it is really a common fetish. And there's a reason that online through FetLife and Reddit alone, they've got a combined membership of more than 250,000 people in water sport groups. And I know that Pornhub search for piss turns up over 20,000 videos. So people are definitely interested in this.
And why do you think people are so interested in this type of play type?
Oh, I think it's pretty obvious, right? It's very taboo, and we've really had a distance with our body fluids. Recently in human history, this is as close as we've gotten to getting back to close to our body fluids. Our culture has just come around to see something like urine as, I guess, something they want to try out.
And especially when it comes to urine, like even beyond the bedroom here, like there's uses for it before
hmm
they like some people like I know that if you get stung by a jellyfish, I'm pretty sure that whole thing is if you pee on
Yeah.
yourself. Yeah. And so there's different types of uses, but I do agree that we've been so separated from bodily functions of just that's just a normal thing of what happens.
hmm
And we're like, oh no, that can't happen to me.
Yeah, I think we forget that it wasn't terribly long ago that everyone had a chamber pot under their bed. And so we used to be a lot closer to our various body fluids than we are today. And I think this is just like a renaissance for pee.
And I think it also brings into the fact of this is like a different type of sensation. And the
hmm
West has such a clean, well, here in Canada, we're like the clean, you gotta be clean all the time,
Sterile. hmm
basically. And so when you're moving into different types of sensation, whether that's liquid or solids or other types of things, it's kind of reconnecting to it's okay to be messy.
hmm hmm Yeah, absolutely. And this is part of the wet and messy play fetish as well. I'm a huge wet and messy play person. And sometimes we do involve water sports in that.
Well, yeah, splashing, I think
Hmm.
I see more and more articles coming out, and even with bringing on foods, I think that is the benefit
Hmm.
of being messy and bringing that sensation play in. And again, other cultures, they have festivals dedicated to that. You know, in Spain, they use tomatoes and it's messy, and they've
Yeah.
got Holi in India. And again, like there's no
Hmm.
festivals that kind of allow you to be messy over here in Canada.
No, no, none at all. None at all here in the US either.
And so when it comes to this type of water sports, we have our golden showers and what you mentioned. So what's like the beginner, medium, and intermediate or the light to extreme versions of this?
The great thing is water sports can be done. It can be done solo. It can be done with one person or multiple people, and it can include all types of things. You can start off just really easy by peeing on someone or being peed on. Then you might want to move on to peeing in an orifice of some sort. You might just want to watch someone hold their urine or hold your own urine. I know that there's people who like peeing on people's clothes. There's some people who just like watching pee while they're not being detected, a little bit of a voyeurism there. There's so many ways you can incorporate this, and you can do it as something as simple as, like I said, just peeing next to someone, all the way to peeing in someone's anus. It really is up to you how far you want to go with this.
Yeah, and I think it also comes down to you can start with baby steps, like take it to the shower
Mm-hmm.
first. That's the whole
Mm-hmm.
point. The
Mm-hmm.
golden shower, I feel like that's the entrance way of that. It's cleanup is easy. You don't have to worry
Yep.
about it. And speaking of
Yep.
cleaning, when it comes to this, I guess things to consider is if you are going to do this in your bedroom, there's things like waterproof blankets, but what other
Mm-hmm.
types of things can you prepare for this?
You want to make sure that you've got some sort of plastic covering, right? I always advise people if they're first starting out with water sports, even though you may see it in porn, they're doing it in bed, don't start in a bed if you don't want to have the possibility of getting your sheets or anything else in your room with urine. You can cover everything you want, but if you're a beginner, you might not want to be thinking about that while you're trying to enjoy this. So make sure you've got towels, make sure you have a change of clothes. Make sure you turn the temperature up so you avoid being cold because you're probably going to be somewhat naked, at least from the bottom down. And make sure that everything goes smoothly with drinking lots of water. You want to stay hydrated. One of my favorite things is getting ready for a water sports scene. And we were doing one with my friend, and she did not have anything to drink. And so it was a humiliation water play scene, but she couldn't do it because she just couldn't pee. You also want to try and avoid foods that have a lot of proteins, like meats and cheese and eggs. That's going to cause an unpleasant smell or taste in your urine. So try to drink something sweet if possible. And then always ask people about any medication or drugs or foods that they may be allergic to and avoid those prior at least 72 hours if possible before you're getting into this play. Because if you have a high allergy, even just being peed on by someone who maybe has had nuts earlier that day can really affect you. So you want to ask things like that.
Wow. I actually didn't know about the allergy thing. That
Yeah.
puts a lot of things in perspective in 72 hours. I think that that's something that most people might overlook
Hmm.
or not
Hmm.
think of. I didn't even know allergies
I
could go through urine.
Yeah, if you have a really, especially if you have a contact allergy, I used to, err on the 24-hour or 12-hour sort of clock. And then I played with someone who was highly, highly allergic to peanuts. Didn't tell me, I didn't ask because I was like, oh, it's been 12 hours. And they started to develop a rash everywhere they were peed on. And they were like, oh my gosh. And we traced it back to, oh, I had peanuts yesterday and you have a peanut allergy. And so I definitely always encourage people to ask those questions.
Wow, that is very, very insightful. So when it comes to other types of health, and you mentioned the food about the smell
Mhm.
that can be influenced, is there other type of things that you should consider when you are drinking or what to drink or not to drink?
Yeah, if you want to give some sort of visceral experience, right? Maybe this is part of humiliation. You can think of things like asparagus and other things that might make your pee smell. There's not anything wrong with it, but it's adding a whole new layer to the pee play that you're doing. I like to personally, especially if I'm playing with someone who's never done water sports for the first time, I like to drink fruit juice so I can sweeten the taste of my urine. I'm not necessarily peeing in their mouths, but if it, splashes on them, I'd love to give them a more pleasant experience when possible. So if you can, try to have some sweet stuff before you get into this play. And I mean like fruits and juices, not candy or anything like that.
Absolutely. And when someone's first, maybe they want to bring it up to their partner, but they're a little bit too nervous to kind of bring this to their attention. Do you have any advice on how they can bring this topic up for them?
Yeah, yeah. When you're talking to your partner about your kinks and fetishes, it's super essential to just be open and honest as possible. You want to really be clear about what you would like to get from this experience firsthand, whether that's the physical sensation of being urinated on or the visual stimulation of being verbally told about urination or a combination of these. You really want your sexual partner to feel comfortable asking you questions, and you want to do your best to answer those before getting their enthusiastic consent. And once you do get their consent, or at least they are like, I'm willing to try this, make a plan and stick with it. Make sure that you're talking about general cleanliness. Tell them if you want this to happen in the shower, on the floor. Think about where your urine's going to go, what places you're going to avoid, and then stick to that plan so that they are introduced to it in the way that they agreed to.
And I think that that template, that framework that you just described, that really can work for any type of play types, which is so great. And it's just
Mhm.
sticking to the plan. I think that when people first start getting into things that are new, having a plan, a reference checkpoint can, it really does help people.
Absolutely. And some people may be uncomfortable with a full-blown golden shower from the start. So, just like Dana said, you can ease into these things. You can try this by just urinating on someone's feet to start with, and then work your way up the body until you're being entirely urinated on. You can also just try urinating on a partner with the shower on so that it's washed away immediately. And my favorite mind fuck of all is when I'm playing with someone for the first time and I'm using a different type of liquid. I am using water first, or maybe I've mixed water with apple juice just to see that initial reaction because I'm just giving them a chance to see how they'll react. If they feel a drop on them and they're like, "Oh no," and they don't like it. I guess what? I didn't I didn't really pee on you yet. We haven't even started. This is just a liquid. And so you can always play with it in that way as well, just to ease into what it will actually be like.
That's a great idea. And even that, it's like the color or like depending on how much water
Mm-hmm.
you put into it, it's kind of like that could be yeah, if you use that and you're not really feeling it, then there's probably a high chance you're not going to feel the real thing. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a
Mm-hmm.
really good idea.
Yeah, and this will help you just figure out what you want out of the water sports and the mechanics of it all. Because when you're trying something new, you've got to figure out if you're going to be peeing with an erection, if you're aiming, if you're standing over someone, or like I said, maybe just using a certain part of them. And this gives you that control when you're using like a cup of something.
Mm. And when somebody's actually going into those positions, like what's some easy, would it just be lying on the ground per se? That's kind of like the easiest one to go with, or maybe on all fours?
Yeah, the easiest thing to do is just to have someone lay down. If you have a backyard or somewhere private, you can go. Even if it's in the house, we like to do it in the shower, right? Just standing over someone who's laying down in the shower is a good place to start.
Mm. Absolutely. I also think that it really is because if it's something that you don't like, you can just clean up right away. Like it's at the same time.
Immediately.
And so when it comes to this type of play, do you find that there's a lot of misconceptions around it, whether it's hygienic or not, or dirty versus clean type arguments kind of swirl this a bit?
Oh, so many misconceptions. Over the years, I've met many people with a desire to engage in any sort of water sports, but they refrain due to health concerns or other misconceptions around this play. And the most common one I hear over and over is that the person and whoever's involved in this urophilia experience really wants the desire to feel the physical sensations of being urinated on, whether that's on your face or torso or wherever. But I mentioned this, it can go well beyond that. It doesn't even ever have to be physical for some people. And I think a lot of people assume when they hear this that it can only be enjoyed by people who have experienced some sort of abuse or sexual trauma or are looking to be degraded in a certain way. And that could potentially be the case, but in reality, anyone can take pleasure in the act or thought of water sports, regardless of their past.
Mm. I also feel like there's a big misconception that it's mostly males because maybe
Hmm.
it's easier for them to urinate on somebody, but it's just
Yeah.
one of those things. Like, no, that's not always the case.
No, no, that's absolutely not always the case. And I think, like you mentioned, when I first heard about water sports, when I got into the BDSM scene, I was like, ooh, that's not really my thing. And after trying it, spoiler alert, it's now one of my favorite kinds of things to do. And I wish there was more talk about how it's not as taboo as I think people make it. It's, again, it's being searched for a lot. So people are interested in this.
And I also think that, you should kind of give some attention to your urine. There's a lot of indications that
Hmm.
it can tell you something about your body and to learn about yourself, an indicator of like just dehydration or various points of
Hmm.
interest. So it's something that like it's still connected to you. It's still yours.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's not as unhygienic as I think people think it is on the surface. We all have heard that, pee is sterile, but this is a really low risk behavior for STIs and pregnancies. And so it's not as unsafe as I think it seems on the surface.
I was going to ask if there was other types of safety issues in regards to STIs and things like that.
Yeah, I mentioned peeing in someone's anus or somewhere else, right? If you're peeing into a vagina, I know there's lots of people who fantasize about this. Just remember, this can throw off the pH. This can cause irritation or infection. And so, if you like that, try peeing in someone's anus first. This is a safer option in this regard, but it's also not a beginner act. You want to really be sure if you are engaging in pee play that you start peeing on someone midstream so that you can allow any bacteria or semen to be flushed out in those first waves of liquid that are coming out of you, and really avoid urine that has any visible traces of blood. Don't play if you have cuts or lesions or open wounds anywhere where urine may come into contact with, because it can transmit hepatitis B. So if you're not vaccinated already and you're interested in this, consider getting vaccinated and consider sterilizing any equipment you're going to use. If you're using things like catheters or sex toys like urethral gags, really sterilize those things. And I like to wear protective goggles, sometimes depending on the positions we're in, to just prevent any of the urine from getting into my eyes or whoever's eyes it is I'm playing with. And then I always tell people get tested regularly for STIs and just encourage all of your partners and anyone you play with to do that so that you can keep an eye on your health and safety. And don't
Mm.
consume pee. Don't consume pee. If possible, you can, but you want to be mindful that it can sometimes lead to bodily discomfort. You might get an upset stomach. Your skin might be slightly irritated, depending on how sensitive you are.
No, that's good to know. And also just regular checkups. It kind of goes in with the same hand of just play safe, regardless of what's
Mhm.
happening. And you mentioned tools and other things that you can use to play with this. Do you mind going back to that a little bit and kind of going into each tool that people can use and types of situations where they can be used in?
Yeah, so there's a few different toys and instruments you can use, especially if you're into the fetish side of things. I mentioned a catheter. Some people are really into catheter or medical play, so you could use things like that. You also could use something like a urinal gag, which is just a gag that has a funnel on it so that someone can pee in it and you can drink it. There's also all kinds of plugs that you can use that will create an opening so that you have a better chance of aiming into the anus if that's where you want to put your stream. And so you can really, run the gamut of toys that you can use. And also sometimes just peeing on something, like if you pee on someone's collar or pee on someone's shirt and then make them wear that, that's also a form of water sports. Even if you're not doing it on them at the time, you can consider that water sports.
Hmm, that's interesting. And at the end of the day, I feel like this is just another form of playing with power and playing with
Mhm.
creativity and kind of branching what a sexual experience can be. We're just widening that up.
I think so too. It's always difficult to know exactly what draws someone to certain kinks and fetishes, but regarding water sports, there's a few different themes that I see come up, and power play is definitely one of the top ones. It can be an ultimate act of power to perform a golden shower on someone, and if it's kink, then that might be your bottom or your submissive. You may even go further, which is making them drink your pee or gargle it. I love that there's a sensory focused experience when you involve water play into anything.
Yes. And sensory is something that, again, it's that messiness that we all love. Like, we all like to get dirty when we were younger. And it's one of those things, like, after a certain age, you're not allowed to do any of those things anymore. And so, reconnecting to just being human, I think at the end of the day, is
hmm
what this play really, to me, speaks volumes for.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. It's a very intimate act, right? One of you is probably not having any bottoms on because you need to have easy access for the stream to flow, and the other one is laying there waiting to receive something that most people want no contact with whatsoever. So it can definitely build intimacy when you're talking about fluid sharing. For some people, this is fluid bonding and it has a spiritual or deeper meaning to them. I've read that for some folks, this enhances their intimacy. It makes them want to really strengthen their attachment to this person.
Yeah, that's kind of the way that I see it. I feel like it's one of those like commitment, like I commit to you, or we are like this is special. Like I don't know. Like that's kind of what I feel when it comes to this.
hmm
That there is a very big bonding element of this. I've never done like blood play, but I've seen people say things that I've seen also people that are in urine play. They kind of say the same thing, but they're
hmm
using different liquids.
Yeah, yeah. And I think for a lot of people, it's a big deal when you're swapping something other than saliva, right? We're
Mm.
so used to kissing, but when we get to things that do require a sterile environment and do require a certain level of knowledge and safety protocols to make it enjoyable for everyone, I think people shy away from that. But these are very, very heightened experiences for people that run all the way from, okay, you've just peed on me once and I'll never see you again. This was at a party to people where it's embedded into their
Mm.
relationship and their bonding style.
And when it comes to this, what do you find is the most fascinating for you?
I still love the voyeuristic component of this because I'm a femdom. I don't particularly like being peed on, but I love peeing on people. And I've been a part of a lot of water sports scene, whether it's my scene or someone else's scene. And my favorite thing is everyone reacts differently to being peed on. Some
Mm.
people just go completely silent and receive it, and some people, even though they love it, are screaming and squirming around. And so I love how it affects everyone very differently. Even if they've done it a million times, it's always different if you're doing it with someone new.
Absolutely. Now, there's another type of water play, but squirting is something that people always come back to. Of like, what is it? How do you do it? Is it pee? Is it not pee? Like the arguments online, I think are just so they're all over the place online.
hmm
But yes, if we could go into that for a little bit, just to define what that is and kind of how
hmm
someone can do that.
Squirting really refers to the fluid that's expelled from the vagina during an orgasm. And not all people with vaginas squirt during orgasm, and those who do may only do it some of the time. And this type of orgasm includes just a rapid ejection of urine along with other fluids from the bladder.
Mm. So it's more than just that. So what other types of fluids is in that?
Yeah, so even though you said it, right, it's a misconception that squirting is not considered a water sport because squirting is not strictly urine. Part of the reason why squirting and piss play are so entangled in the public conception has to do with how porn has regulated and restricted this. A lot of adults come to these platforms and they don't actually allow urine videos, and so it gets banned from these creators. And so they've gotten around this by using the word squirt. And sometimes you'll go look at a squirting video and it's actually just someone being peed on. And so it's one of those things where I don't think people on the outside actually want to separate these two because they're like two sides of the same coin for them. So but it's definitely in my eyes something that I would call a certain type of water sports. If you know you're a squirter, tell the person that you're with, hey, watch out. You may see this coming out.
Oh my gosh, I agree with this wholeheartedly. Where was I? I was at Oasis and there was this woman and it must have gone like 2, 3 feet. Like it was wild. Like I was like, wow, my goodness, like that's a splash zone right there. Like so that is so awesome. But also I'm shocked but not shocked, I guess, in a way to the idea that urine play is censored on pornography
I
sites. And that's how,
know.
hmm.
I Yeah. Yeah, it's weird because again, like I said, a lot of people are searching for this, a lot of people are interested about this, but especially here in the US, I think we just have our sex education. We have such a lack of sex education here, and it's deeply shaped by porn, and peeing and squirting often get conflated, and no one wants to take the time to parcel those two things out.
Hmm. I do find that interesting because I don't see an issue. Like there's some graphic stuff out there, and I just feel like this
Hmm.
is on the lighter side of
Yeah.
kinks and BDSM and kink when it comes to this. Like, this is really just you using your body, and it's liquid, and there's not
Hmm.
really a lot that could go. Like, there's risks in some places, but there's
Hmm.
not really a lot that can go on. There's no ropes that could get too tight. There's nothing around necks. Like, there's all of these things. So it's interesting to hear that that is so heavily monitored.
Yeah, yeah, it is, it is, and I think it speaks to a bigger issue of not wanting to educate, not wanting to include kink and fetishes in porn, even though it's there, it's already there. So them eliminating the word water sports or urine just doesn't really help matters at all.
Mm. And when it comes to squirting, I feel like, at least when I was growing up, it was one of those questions like, do you or do you not? And there was some sort of like, well, I can, so I must be better, like, or I
Hmm.
can't. So
Hmm.
I still kind of get that feeling. So I don't want anybody out there to feel bad if that's not
Yeah.
you. But I do feel like there's a little bit of this air of like, oh, you can't? Oh.
Yeah, no. And I think it's important to remember studies have shown that anywhere from 10 to 55% of people with vaginas have experienced it. But there's a lot of research that needs to go in to determine the exact causes of squirting and ejaculation in this manner. I think a lot of the ambiguity is because the Skene's gland varies from person to person, and that's the gland that's responsible for that squirting. Some people with vaginas don't have any, and others have very small ones. So it's nothing you can do or not do to make it work every time or make it happen for the first time. But there's ways you can ease yourself into it, but don't feel like you are less good at anything sexual because you can't squirt. I didn't squirt until I was 30. I never knew I could. I hadn't been in a situation that had allowed that to happen. And so I was like, yeah, that's not a thing for me. And now it is.
I think that's what it was too. Like, I can't. And it's like, oh, well, you can. It's just the situation wasn't right or whatever, the
Hmm.
mixture of it. Because then when you do, you're like, holy shit,
Oh shit.
what the fuck just happened?
Yeah, no, that totally happened to me the first time I went, oh, gosh, I think I peed. And my partner was like, nope, no, you didn't. No, you didn't.
So, is there any last tips when it comes to water sports that you want to cover that I didn't mention?
Um, Not really. I just want people to remember this is something that doesn't have to be done the way that you've seen it done in porn. I think, especially with golden showers, this is one of the most recognizable fetishes and kinks in the mainstream collective. And so lots of people know about it. Lots of people have their own misconceptions about it. But once you actually do it, it's not that scary. It's not that messy the way it seems. And it doesn't have to be the way that you've seen it done. It can be done so lightly and just next to someone. It doesn't have to be on someone.
Mm. And I do feel like it's not any messier or cleaner than half the fetishes out there. Like if you like I've been in some situations with wax play that it's just like gotten
Oh
out of
gosh, yeah.
hand and it's so hard to clean up when it doesn't hit that mat. And so that I would argue is like so much harder.
So much harder. I agree. I agree. I spend a lot of time picking wax out of rugs that, oh no, we've dripped
Mm.
one spot of wax. So yeah, this is much, much, much easier to clean up than wax, I promise.
And I agree with you that people, when it comes to this type of play and like just their body in general, get to know it. It's not that
Hmm.
scary. Like, I think it's mostly mental. Like, oh, we've been taught not to like it or like think it's weird. And so it's just kind of is that your thought? Like, do you think it's weird or is that somewhere else put that in your head? And then when you do try it, then that's when you're able to actually say like yes or no.
This is why solo play is a great way to introduce yourself to water sports. Start by just peeing in the shower and then peeing on yourself in the shower. Put your legs up against the wall, figure out what you like and dislike, and then add in those sexual elements like masturbation. And that'll help you figure out what you want out of water sports and the mechanics of it, like I was talking about, because peeing and trying to aim depends on where you're at and who you are and how you're doing it. And so get familiar with those things. Take time to explore solo.
I was gonna say, do you have any tips for aiming?
My best thing to do is if I can stand over someone, I can have way more control and I use my fingers and I kind of like put them against my vagina and I kind of aim. I use it like a pressure point sprayer thing. I like put my fingers down to give it some pressure.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, this has been very great conversation. I absolutely love having you on the show, and thank you for expanding more on water play and what it is and the misconceptions around it.
You're so welcome. I love chatting with you about anything kinky, so happy to be here.
Absolutely. And where can my listeners find you?
They can always find me on FetLife at D20Domme or on my website, mundanemiss.com. That is my real life kinky blog. And I will be at a festival as well called Bound Fest. And I'm part of a new podcast called Bound Top to Bottom. It is a kinky podcast where we interview real kinksters and talk about anything from pet play all the way to race play and other taboo kinks like this.
Absolutely. Well, that's exciting. I'm definitely going to tune in for that. And for my listeners, you guys know what to do. I will see you on Wednesday. As always, stay kinky.